Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Preppers Fireside. Today, we're going to talk about comms. We've got Brian in, Scottish Prepper 73 as usual. How's your day going, Brian?
All good, buddy. All good. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. And we have a special guest, Hawkins, our resident network guru when it comes to communications. And you can see he's represented by my giant flag merch that you can buy on the shop. How you doing, Hawkins?
Yeah, good. Thank you, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, not so bad. Not so bad. One day we'll coax him out of his shell and you'll see a face at some point in the future, I'm sure. Right, we're talking about communications in general and emergency communications. I just acknowledge Miss Worm in the chat, keeping you all in check. All the members, thank you all for coming in. Appreciate you being here. I'm not going to scroll through and say hello to everyone. We know it all goes wrong every time I do that. So let's talk communications and why do we need emergency communications. So essentially we're talking about here, whatever the SHTF situation is, it ends up with a power cut. Short term, your cell phone might last for an hour up to 2 or 3 hours depending, because cell phone towers have mobile phone towers have backup batteries in a lot of places. Shortly after that will disappear. Your internet alongside that, obviously your 4G and stuff like that. After about 24 to 48 hours, UK hosted internet sites will just disappear because their ISPs, they'll all go down. And then days after that, we could lose all international access to any sort of website. And days to weeks would be total internet collapse, which is great. So every means of communication we do right now would be gone. Nice and cheery, eh, Brian?
What can I say? Chuckles strikes again.
So
you're right, though. It's realistic.
It is. That's a general ballpark. Anyone wants to jump in and correct me, feel free. But that's the kind of situation we'd be in. Are you raising your hand for a question? Or?
No, I was turning the spotlight on me.
Checking he wasn't doing an Elon Musk.
I'll tell you what. The first one we'll talk about. Fill me in. You can fill me in on this. I'll come to you first, Hawkins. Often you see in the films where the cell phone's gone and blah, 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 the landline still works. The old copper wire landlines are still working. How long could people expect that to actually happen for?
As long as the exchange has power. So depending on what battery backup or diesel generator they've got in the exchange to keep it going. But the problem now is BT are moving away from copper to fiber optic to keep the maintenance issues down. It's obviously a lot more reliable. You don't get the water ingress problems, everything like that. So there's a guy who's on our particular mesh network. He works for BT and his job is literally going around ripping out all the old PSTN lines, and that's what they're doing. So it might work for some areas right now, but it's not going to last long. And then everyone who has fiber to the premises, like I've got in my house, if you can't keep your ONT powered up with one of Brian's nice EcoFlows or something like that, and you've got no internet coming through that way. So I think, what did Ofcom say originally? I think they wanted 2 hours of backup because we have so few power cuts as a nation compared to other places like America and the Wild West. I think they said 2 hours was the recommended. So on the BT OpenReach box that is put into all the new build houses and everything like that, you used to have a small battery pack. I don't even know if they're doing that now, to be honest. But you're looking at a couple of hours realistically. That's it.
Yeah, Brian. Even if you get that couple of hours, it's got to be a nightmare, right? It's going to be like New Year's Eve and the Millennium. For those who are alive during it, trying to get a text message through was just a nightmare. Surely the network's just going to be flooded for them last few hours going, is your power off? What's happening? What was that big mushroom?
That's on the assumption that the government doesn't kill it for essential services only. Call me cynical, but I would imagine they may well chop the comms to restrict panic, to restrict the reduction in bandwidth for essential comms.
Would make sense, yeah.
I think they would probably kill it, mate.
Yep. Save power for Tetra to keep working, because the police and emergency services and everything use Tetra airwave system, don't they? And they have their own towers and whatnot. And as you said, Mike, some of them are shared from your previous experience. But the reduction in public communications will just save more wattage to keep that going. Yeah, we had a guy who was in a group that I used to chat to. I've met him down south, and he was saying that the Tetra systems were 3 days battery backup.
Yeah,
and they're gone.
it's interesting because, like I say, they've got separate nodes on these masts, and there's one node that's just dedicated to emergency services. It's like the 8th node on a set of 8 for every set of 8. So I'm wondering if they can shut down the rest and just keep that open. If that's going to power save, I can't imagine they wouldn't do that. So
I was at a job hypothetically this morning at 8 o'clock, and
you are hypothetically at a job. Do you hypothetically get paid for that as well?
I could get hypothetically fired for it as well. So it's confidential. So hypothetically, this job may have been in a hospital, and their power went out in the storm for an hour, and the standby generators didn't come on, and the lifts all went tits up, and the GSM links and the lifts went down. So they had no comms in the lifts.
So the emergency bell did nothing then?
Oh no, the alarm will still work, but nobody will hear it. It doesn't link to theirs. Theirs don't go to a call center; they go to security, and that didn't go anywhere because the internal power was down. So you'd people stuck in lifts. You couldn't phone from department to department to say, "We've got Mr. Smith's chest cracked open Theatre 1, and with no lights." It was like that for an hour. I'm led to believe.
Wow.
And yeah, they had no comms, they had nothing.
Yeah, that's worrying. Just acknowledge Paul C became a new YouTube member. Thank you, Paul C. It's really appreciated, the support, especially on the Fireside. Brian usually demonetizes us somehow. So right, let's get into the actual comms then. So landlines were out. The next thing I think a lot of people see, I'm not going to say what we would do next thing, but a lot of people see, and one thing I looked at one point before you slapped my hand, Hawkins, is satellite phones. Because again, it's something you see in the like on movies and stuff like that. So I mean, I know they're bloody expensive, but would they stay reliable? Is it a good way to keep in touch with family if you've both got one?
Depends on the timeline. So I used to have one many moons ago, about 10 years ago now, and the monthly repayment or monthly charge subscription fee was an absolute fortune for a very minimal amount of minutes. Even then, it was an Inmarsat one. Trying to get signal out and about, even in very unobstructed places, shall we say, was difficult. Quality of the comms was poor. But then when you talk to reliability, they all use ground stations to throw their comms back to. So it depends on the company and how much money they've spent on the infrastructure of the ground station, really, doesn't it? How much backup batteries and diesel generators and stuff if we're talking a national grid down event, where the I don't know where they are for Inmarsat. I know for Starlink they've got tons of ground stations now, and you can get a list of them on the Starlink website. And you can only imagine with good old Elon running it, there's going to be a lot of Tesla batteries backing it up. You'd hope, for such critical comms.
So they're only reliable as long as the ground stations have power then?
Yep.
So a similar sort of situation, really. Interesting. Have you ever had a satellite phone, Brian?
No, and I'm very cynical for the same reason as the landlines, and as that which is given can be taken away. So whether it's taken away by a power cut or taken away to preserve essential comms, I wouldn't want to rely on something that I've got no direct control over.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like it's just going to fall into the same category of you're at the mercy of how long their backup is for. And again, they'd probably hijack that for the emergency services and things like that, or military communications, I suppose. So we boil down to what most preppers jump straight onto, which is radio communications. All different types. Obviously, the government prepper site recommends you have a wind-up radio just so you could stay abreast, like a hand crank one, so you could just hear what's going on, see how long the BBC World Service keeps going for. Then we talk about, we hear about ham radios, which you see in movies with all the truckers, CB radios, sorry, which is all the truckers. Then you've got ham radios, FRS, GMRS, which is walkie-talkies essentially, and satellite radios. But I assume, I'm not sure, does anyone know about satellite radios? Do they use the same ground stations?
That's just sat phones, I think.
It's just the same. Yeah. It's because the brief I've got from that says works anywhere with a clear view of the sky. Useful for remote areas. So I don't know. Anyway, let's start with CB radio. So who wants, Hawkins, do you want to tell us all about CB radio? You're the expert.
Expert. So Citizens Band radio got popular in probably the 60s, something like that, was it? I think before my time.
Rubber ducky.
Yeah, it was the. I think they were getting imported and they were all illegal at one point, but again before my time. But yeah, they're all right. They run, I think it's 27 megahertz, so it's in the HF band. It's dead from what I've seen. I run one here, just listening and scanning about, and I see virtually nothing on it. There is people in the US who, I mean, if you look at the UK legal side of it, you've got, I think it's 4 watts or something you're allowed to play with, whereas there's Americans who are pumping out a kilowatt, with massive amplifiers and stuff, and just booming signals out all over the planet, essentially. But I've never picked up anything local comms on CB in the multiple different places I've lived in the UK in the last 9-10 years. So I have one. Would I rely on it? No.
Does that not make it a good communication tool for a prepper network, though? The fact that it's died and it's kind of took a back seat?
Yes and no. 4 watts on HF isn't a lot to get nice, clear voice through.
What are we talking range-wise for people that don't understand the watt side of things?
All depends on propagation. Like if the atmosphere and the sun, because the sun is pretty much king essentially in HF communications, and what its effects on the ionosphere and stuff are to how your signal propagates and bounces. So if all things are working right, you might get, you'd be talking to Europe and stuff on 4 watts, but if it's not, then you won't. So it's very, very hit and miss. I know you were quite keen on it when you came around the other week and we were talking about it and whatnot, but I prefer PMR, to be honest. It's much clearer. Obviously you're only line of sight communications with PMR, but if I was to choose one or the other, I'd choose PMR. And if there was a grid down scenario, I'd look to set up my own repeaters if need be on a hilltop.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking a lot of infrastructure there. What about the initial downtime? Brian, have you got any sort of inkling into CB? Did you? I mean, I think you're older than me and Hawkins. Just, throw that out there.
I didn't want to say that.
Oh, look, my hand's doing that thing again with the handle. Sorry when it does that. Better minds. I did have an old handheld one many, many moons ago at the same time when I had a Ford Capri. And this handheld version the aerial was poking out the top. And I hadn't a clue what I was doing. I was just pressing buttons and making a pest of myself because I'd no awareness of the lingo or etiquette or anything. So I probably added nothing to the scene, put it that way. It was short-lived. That would have been circa 1992-ish.
Yeah. But I mean, what about now from a prepper perspective? Obviously, Hawkins is on about PMR, but it's line of sight, whereas CB wouldn't be. But you have got a lot of restrictions with the power and the sun and stuff like that. But it would mean you could talk to somebody who might be usually blocked.
I've got the ubiquitous Bofang, which seems to be the prepper staple, and I've done some range testing on them, and from sitting in the living room and my wife in the car with my son, I got about a mile, and that was over a hill as well. So that was as good as it got, and I've got different aerials to stick on it, but it would get me in comms with my brother who's a certain distance away, which would be fine.
Yeah. So Hawkins, are we scrapping CB? Is it just a bad idea in general then?
I personally don't think it's worth it, to be honest. That's my feelings and opinion. But I play with ham radio, which is, same sort of thing, just a little bit more power and just slightly different frequency ranges. So, and there's a lot more users on ham radio, especially on the HF bands. You're talking worldwide propagation very easily.
But you're talking also scary language to a lot of preppers. They don't want a lot more people on there, right?
You'll be surprised though. There's quite an emergency communications scene on ham radio now. There's still the old hams who want nothing to do with it and just would laugh at you. And if you browse forums online, they want nothing to do with it, and they a bit begrudging to preppers and whatnot. But you can check YouTube and you can watch channels such as S2 Underground, the Tech Prepper, people like that who are putting massive amounts of effort into ham radio and emergency preparedness. SHTF, who's in Finland, I think. I've got continuous comms with him from my garage. It's just there. So there is a scene in HF, in ham radio HF for emergency preparedness. Definitely, I think it's the way to go over CB in a big way.
What ham is?
Yeah.
Yes.
I know there's that initial.
So what is it when you mention PMR then?
So PMR is UHF line of sight communications that the UK give the average user the ability to use license free. So it's public mobile radio. The limitations with that are you have to buy a radio that meets the specifications that the government give you, which means that it's got to have a antenna that cannot be removed to put a higher gain antenna on it. So it's kind of molded into the radio, and also they're limited to 0.5 watt. So you're looking at realistically about a mile, something like that, off a PMR. But that doesn't stop people from buying different radios and opening them up, so to speak, to get the PMR frequencies. Because if you turn a PMR radio on at 8 p.m. on a Sunday night, you have what's called 8 at 8, where everyone goes on channel 8 at 8 p.m. and you'll hear people booming out 25 watts, 50 watts, and they're talking all over the place. There's a big PMR scene. A lot of it opened up by a YouTuber in Manchester called Lewis. You've probably seen him if you've watched some of the Meshtastic stuff, Ringway Manchester. He's big on that and inspired a lot of people to do the whole 8 to 8 thing. And let's put it this way: if there was a nationwide grid down event, the amount of people I've heard on PMR 8 at 8 p.m, I'd happily turn PMR on, and I'd no doubt you'd be listening to a lot of people playing on the Balfangs or playing on the Retivis radios and stuff, and they'd be getting comms out 30, 40 mile quite a lot of the time, because it's height is might. It's UHF, so it's line of sight communication. So if you've got height on your side, obviously, I assume you two believe that the Earth is round. So yeah, so you've got to have that
bombshells on the Fireside. I apologize.
So you've got to have that height in order to mitigate the curvature of the Earth. So if you've got height on your side, if you live Yorkshire way, for instance, over Bradford at 250 meters above sea level, you might get your comms out 70 kilometers from your house. Whereas if you live in some flatlands, I don't know, Norfolk Broads, are they flat? I think they are. You'll have comms out about 7 miles. So that's the difference. If you can get the height, you're good.
Yeah, well, I mean, what puts a lot of people off is the license. Brian, have you done the license? You said you've got a Bauerfang. Have you done the license?
It's on the to-do list.
I've
got the link. I've got the link that Hawkins put in the Discord server, and I've saved it on my favourites. But to be honest, mate, with college and other shit, then I just don't have time. But it is on the to-do list. I've been watching a few of the guys that have done it or started it.
Yeah. A lot of people say this to me. I mean, we did a survey before. How ready are you for SHTF when it comes to comms? The choices were fully prepared, equipment and plan. I have some gear, but no clear plan. Just going to wing it. And I don't want to talk to people in SHTF. We got 39%, which was the highest one, have some gear, but no clear plan. 35% are just going to wing it. which is very similar to have some gear and no clear plan. And only 13% are fully prepared with equipment and a plan. And that's 82 votes at this stage. Is it a good prep, Hawkins, to buy one of these radios, throw it in a cupboard, let it gather dust, wait till SHTF? Then you don't have to wait for the license, do the license thing, right?
I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it, as they say. However, a bit of basic knowledge will make it work a lot more. You would have seen Hurricane Helene and whatnot, which hit, southeast USA, and ham radio played a big part over there, and a lot of that because they lost all comms up in the hills there and everything once it all came through. But there was a repeater station that was up there that was being manned by a ham radio guy, and I think he ran it for like 5 days or something. There's some YouTube videos you can watch, and he got interviewed. And it was critical. It was crucial. Nothing else was working. You had a couple of people with Starlinks and things, but everyone was using ham radio. And there was people getting on there who were not licensed, who had a Baofeng, and they were getting out. And initially, I think there were some people, old grumpy hams, who were moaning, saying, "You're not licensed. You shouldn't be using it." But they swiftly got told to. I can't say the word.
Go take a running jump because it's an emergency.
Because it is an emergency situation. There's people dying, there's people whose houses are washed away and everything else. So they got voted down very swiftly. But
how enforced is that though? Because I mean, you define an emergency situation. If I've got my get home bag and I've got a Baofeng in there or what have you, and I'm on the way home and I'm in the middle of nowhere and I'm trying to reach somebody to pick me up or help me, would they enforce something on that? Or
I'm not entirely sure what Ofcom's definition would be, but in America, where it's talked about more often, it's an immediate threat to life is what classes an emergency situation.
Be that 1 or hundreds, it doesn't matter. It's just emergency. Yeah, threat to your life.
But what you got to remember is ham radio. The license, in my opinion, is not there to. It's not like here's a license, you've got to pay this fee, we want to regulate it such. It's more of to teach you the basics of radio, because that's what it does. The course teaches you the foundation level, which is all I am, because I've never seen the point to go above it now. They've upped the wattage limits to 25 watt for us. So it's to teach you the basics, how not to interfere with other users who, you pick up a Baofeng from Amazon and it comes with a bunch of preloaded channels, which you're technically not allowed to transmit on. I've never actually looked at what the frequencies are and what they overlap on and who actually uses them, but every part of the frequency allocation is allocated to somebody. There's no parts of any frequency that are free, whether they're military, whether they're aviation, whether they're search and rescue, whether they're marine, whether they're whatever they are, they're all in use. And the amateur radio band have a certain amount of frequency space to use to learn about radio, to educate yourself, to experiment. And that's what it's meant for. It's meant for people to just learn and tinker with radio. So that's its design by the government, Ofcom, everything like that. You know what I mean? So you're doing your license and you learn basics such as the difference between HF, VHF, UHF, the different frequency ranges, propagation and bouncing the signal off the ionosphere to get it to go around the world. You learn about things like standing wave ratio, because if you just think in your mind, you've got an antenna on top of your Baofeng that came with it, and you press the transmit button and you've got a 5 watt Baofeng, you think that 5 watts is emigrating from that radio into the world and somebody's going to pick it up. But if you've got a substandard antenna, which is what all the Baofengs are, your SWR might be quite high. So you're pumping 5 watts into the antenna, but 30% of it might be bouncing back into the radio. So you're actually only transmitting at 60% power. So it's all these sorts of things that you're learning. There's some bits that are a bit more technical, some bits that are just easy, some bits is just talking to you about call signs, because obviously you're issued a call sign by the government, and that's just so that you can identify yourself and other hams know who you are and everything like that. But and some of the marks on the 25 questions, I think it is tell me where this person's from, and judging by the call sign and the letters in it, you can tell whether they're from the UK, or sorry, England. You can tell whether they're from Scotland, tell they're from Wales, France, everything like that. So it's not a license for here we want to charge you to use a radio. It's we want to ensure the basics, not to can't use that word again, not to mess around with everybody else who's using the radio frequency spectrum for purposes that they've paid for, essentially, because everybody buys that allocation space off Ofcom. You know what I mean? They're paying for it. So when somebody just grabs a radio and starts transmitting on frequencies willy-nilly, you're going over somebody somewhere. Like, it might not be within your range, you know, that frequency range might be used at a certain place, and you might be transmitting up in Scotland and you're not interfering with anybody, but somebody owns that allocation of frequency space. So there's like, one of the questions is X amount of kilometers from Charing Cross in London, you're not allowed to use a certain part of the UHF spectrum. And I think from reason that is, it's reserved for MI5 for use. Like, and you know, it's just learning all that stuff essentially, and it's good. I did it, and then I got the wife to do it as well, and she's not technically minded at all, and she had to study for it and properly wrote notes. She's quite academic, but she spent, I think, a month or two studying in the background with a 2-year-old at the same time, in her free time, which probably wasn't a lot. And you know, she managed to do it. So, and I think she got 1 or 2 questions wrong, so she aced it really. But it's achievable for everybody to do. It's just whether you want to put that bit of time in.
And obviously, Full of Hopes just put whoosh, went right over my head. You know, someone like, you know, of Brian's generation and older, are they going to struggle with it?
No, not at all. Radio's old school. It's, you know, it's been around. Brian's generation, you can see the Pepsi Max is boiling out of his.
Fuck you, mate. No. Fuck you. I'm not old, I'm seasoned.
The thing that always put me off the thought of amateur radio, and why I never did a license for it until a couple of years ago, was I always thought that you still had to know Morse code to do it. And I was like, I'm never going to sit there and learn Morse code. Not got the time. My attention deficit disorder would not let me do that. So I was just gave up on the idea. And then once I learned that you didn't have to do Morse code, I was like, go on then, may as well do it. And for anyone who's got any sort of background in electronics or electrics or something like that, you'll pick it up very, very easily. It's not difficult. It's not a barrier to get into it. It's just you need to do it safely, because there is a bit on safety and everything. It's doing it safely. It's not interfering with other users, and then crack on, lads. The world's yours.
Is it something people can just carry on working at, or can they fail and they've got to redo it? How does it actually work? Because you'll have people that want to do it, but they're worried about it.
Yeah, so it's a test. It is a test. You can do it online now since COVID times. I think it was about 30 quid, something like that, and there's about 25 to 27 questions or something. I think you get an hour or something like that to do it. But for context, I did it in under 3 minutes, because I've done that many practice exams. It literally was just ding, 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 ding. But yeah, I encourage everybody to do it. It's not difficult. If you might find parts of it difficult if you're not technically minded, but if you do to do with the Essex Ham course that I've linked to a bunch of people in the Discord group who have started that course, it's broken down to very manageable chunks. I think it's 2 hours a week of study, which they teach you it. There's videos, you can watch it, and then if you want at the end of it, you then book your own exam. So you can do the Essex Ham course with all their practice mock questions and everything like that, and just keep going at it. The videos are there on YouTube. You can watch them at any point.
Yeah. So would you say that's the way to go for preppers then? And what's the difference with doing the PMR stuff? Do they still have to go? They don't have to go through the license for that, right?
No. So PMR, 0 license. That's public mobile radio. But the restrictions to that are, it's only line of sight communications, and it's technically 0.5 of a watt, and with a fixed antenna, so you're talking a short range. However, as I said, there's a lot of people booming out 25, 50 watts with big antennas on the houses, getting 50 kilometers and things like that. So it just depends who you are and whether you want to do it or not. Ham radio, I do think it's worth it. Say I'm only an M7, so foundation license, but I've got setups here that monitor VHF, UHF constantly, the local repeaters. I'm Yorkshire based, so I can get coverage into a couple of repeaters in Yorkshire and get coverage very reliably over a big area, from kind of Darlington down towards past York and over to different areas. But there's tons of repeaters you can jump on once you program them in. And I originally thought that was all I wanted. I was like, I'll do my ham license so I can get UHF, VHF comms. If there was a power outage, I could at least get out to somebody and find out, is it local? Is it more national? Try and get a bit more information, because if you've got no information coming in, you're literally just going to be sat there listening to your wind-up radio, which I do highly recommend everyone to have a normal FM radio to listen to all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But what really then got me going was HF radio. And once you get into HF and you realize that if you string a wire antenna up in your garden that's 14 meters long and you do it in the right way and it's the right resonance, and you'll learn about all this on the course, it's very easy once you've taught it. I can get comms out all over the world, and I do digital modes 24/7. They just run in the background. And I use one called JS8 Call, which is popular with preppers or the more prepared. And I can get messages out to Australia, America, and that's only using 4 watt. So
Yeah.
I run it on the 40 meter band with a little dedicated 4 watt radio that I paid about 120 quid for. And that just plugs into the PC, and it literally just connects to a program called JS8 Call. And I'm sitting there, and I can it's digital. It's like text messaging. There's a program, and you're essentially just writing messages to other users, and there's call groups and things like that. And then, yeah, it's brilliant. There's inboxes and things like that. So if I say, for instance, Brian, if we couldn't talk to each other directly on HF radio, but we could both talk to somebody in Norway or Finland, and I've had that with people that I do it with anyway, where there's other people in Yorkshire I can't talk to direct, but we can relay messages through the guys in Finland who we can always see. And some of them are the preparedness mindset, and they've all got solar powered stations or battery backup, and they run 24/7 as well. So there's these people like me who run, I'm not going to say key nodes, but nodes that are available all the time that you can leave message on to do store and forward, a bit like a BBS, Brian, which I know you piqued your ears with Mesh Tester.
Yes, that I've looked at a few of them on YouTube. There's a few interesting videos, and it looks relatively straightforward and really, really handy for our way of thinking.
Yeah, agreed.
As I'm told, people of my generation, I can still remember dial-up modems and being able to tell if a game was going to load by the sound coming through the tape deck. With the modem speeds you were getting off Mesh for the bulletin boards and stuff, you had viable emails and you had viable basic pages like CFAX, that sort of shit, if you ever seen that on the TV.
Yeah.
Book your holidays on that back in the day, couldn't you?
That's it, yeah. Check that's what I checked all the football results on. So we've skirted around it. So that's radio. We've talked about satellite, they're in the bin. We've talked about regular phones, they're in the bin.
I wouldn't put satellite in the bin. I think it's a layered approach, isn't it? So like after the Helene stuff, I bought myself a Starlink.
Yeah. Purely
for backup. So it's sat in a box, it's got batteries, it's got cables, it's got connectors, it's being turned on. I've got a Starlink account, it's all firmware updated, and then I've disabled the monthly subscription, and it's back in the box. Because as much as I love ham radio, and I think it's got its usage and everything like that, if there was a regional emergency or something that was bad but wasn't complete grid down, the fact that you could have high-speed internet would be priceless. Do you know what I mean? And a good bargaining chip to help people, to bring people to your way of thinking, to establish them to have communications. If I set my Starlink up outside and people need to phone relatives who are in London or Scotland, they can just Wi-Fi call through my Starlink, and they could be ringing Brian. Brian might be someone's uncle for all I know. You know what I mean? Or yourself, Mike. So Starlink's got its place. In my mind, it's a layered approach. It's how bad have things got? Yes, you're relying on someone's infrastructure. The only thing that you're not relying on someone's infrastructure is simplex communications, where it's point to point, like your ham radio sort of stuff, where you're not relying on any middleman, are you?
So not like a true end of the world SHTF, but like you say, if it's regional, if you've still got that ability, it's great. And like the prepper meet, you're on about bringing it up to there so we can stream the Fireside and stuff like that, which is, it's great. So yeah, it definitely has its place. But we're going to go on to mesh because you've just
See, before we do that,
we're not doing
Miss Worms
smoke
put
signals.
something.
All right.
I think we're losing a few in terms of they don't understand.
I understand.
Want to backtrack slightly.
No, right. So, guys, we're going to go over all the different forms of communication. We'll go on to mesh now, and then we're going to take the conversation into the SHTF side of things and what to do and the planning side of things. We can't do you a full comprehensive guide of how to do everything in 1 hour episode of the Fireside, but if you want more information, join the Discord. You can speak to all three of us through the Discord. By all means, comment on the video and we'll go through there. Some of this will go over your head. Some of it goes over my head. First time I went and met Hawkins, I sat there and was quite, deer in the headlights a bit. I thought my couple of radios and that I was all sorted until I saw his Haven. So I don't know if I was a deer in the headlights or it was the electro, feed around the room. But anyway, let's just talk about mesh briefly, because that's it's almost easier than the ham radios, wouldn't you say, Hawkins?
I'm going to let Brian go with this because he's the newly converted to the mesh and I've spoken too much. So it's time for everyone else to hear his dulcet tones as the new user.
Yeah, Brian. So yeah, that's a good point. It's a great point, Hawkins. You've been introduced to it, similar to me. Got the apps going, stuff like that. How easy was it to get going?
About 5 minutes. I downloaded the app, followed the instructions, and I had nodes. They built up over a period of hours as it detected them, but I had messages and comms coming in that night.
Right.
And the coverage, and incidentally, I should say, that's just the box sitting at the bedroom window. It's not in the loft or anything.
Yeah.
And we're not on top of, although we're on top of a hill, there's other hills round about us, and
yeah, he's not perched on Ben Nevis.
No, not at all. But because it's got a strong community, which is what I liked as well, it was I was aware of it, and it's always been on the list to do it because of my interest in prepping. It was like the kind of the holy grail, and I've not been disappointed. I've got to admit, I took advice from Hawkins on handsets and different things and chipsets to go with. And the one that I'd picked straight out of the box, put the aerial on, turned it on, downloaded the app, click, 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 boom, away it went. And you're getting nodes, so people from Port Glasgow all the way across to the arse end of Edinburgh. And that's people that have put up repeaters on hilltops and different things, and then they go up and they'll check batteries and swap batteries out in winter if need be when the solar's not great. So
just to jump in there, Brian, I was very, very pleased when you had that network around you, because not everybody gets that when they put a mesh-tastic device. Yeah, there's Mike's hand going up. You can sit in a signal dead spot area where you're not getting out very far, and you'll sit there by yourself for a week, a month, a year, and you might never see somebody. And I was made up when you turned yours on that you had this pre-established network that you could just link directly into. And probably some of that's to do with the geography around where you are in Scotland. As you said, somebody's put the effort into putting repeater nodes or router nodes on top of hilltops to service the community, essentially, because it is a community sort of project, the mesh, isn't it?
And there's a Facebook page you'll notice if you go into Facebook, there's a page for most areas. So there was one for Scotland, there's one for Yorkshire, different parts of England. And people will tell you and encourage you where, we've got a node here, or we've changed batteries here.
Right. Can I simplify this for some of the people in here? Right. So just to put it together, what mesh is, essentially, it's a peer-to-peer communication channels, doesn't use masts or anything like that. It just uses your device. Now, your device could be a huge thing with an aerial on your ceiling. It could be a little handheld thing that goes in your car with an aerial. And that device is what does the peer-to-peer connection. And a node is a person or a device. It might not be a person. It might be a repeater node that's up on a hill somewhere. And basically, you use your phone as an app, and you're basically just sending a text message.
Like WhatsApp, isn't it?
Yeah, like WhatsApp. So you'd send a message, it would hit the nearest node, and then it would start jumping or whatever it needs to do to get to the path to the person. You can have private chat rooms on there. You can have just open communications and things like that, but very simplified for people that are struggling to keep up. You could buy a device like Brian got. You download an app, stick the device somewhere high as you can, download the app, sync it to it, off you go. There's different settings and stuff. There's more to it. You can read into it, but he had it going in the same day. But that's essentially what it is. And when we talk about a node, it's a person or a device. So didn't want to interrupt, but people are asking a lot of questions in there, just to try and keep it really basic. It sounds a lot. If you go to like the Meshtastic websites, you start reading it and you think, oh my God. But once you realize the gist of it, it's really quite simple. Brian, what kind of rabbit hole has that took you down now, though?
Oh, the BBS one is when I get more handsets, that'll be something that I want to explore, and that's got a lot of interest for me. It might, well, probably would take them out, but here's the beauty of it: for the price point that they are, you could stick a few of these, in your or your friends or your family's Faraday cages, and you could rebuild your comms network the next day. You would have a viable comms system within your local area, then your extended area, and even if you had enough people aware of what to do if that happened in a national area. I think it's fantastic. It blew my fucking socks off. It was great.
We had a. Sorry, I was going to say we had a stroke of luck about a year or so ago in the UK. There's two YouTubers, the Lewis Ringway Manchester guy, and a guy called Andy Kirby, who you've most doubtedly
seen his stuff.
Yeah, and basically they had quite a decent radio following, and they made it go quite viral in the country. So I put a node up on a hill near me. It's about 220 meters above sea level, about 8 months before they started making videos, and I saw no users, 0 users. And I thought to myself, if I ever get 2 or 3 users, this will be an amazing experience. Like, there'll be people to talk to in some sort of event, blah, blah, blah. And then once they made some videos and it went viral, and we were very lucky with that, in the Yorkshire area, we were a victim of our own successes, and the mesh went too big because there's limited bandwidth over the connection. If you're running along fast, it's quite a slow connection. So it's text only for everybody. There's no pictures getting sent or anything like that. But it's a great communication network for text messaging. But because we had, I think, over 300 users at one point, there's that much background telemetry being sent from all the nodes of pinging and saying, I'm here, look at me, and I'm here, and I'm here, and I'm here, and I'm here, that we were a victim of our own success. So, but the firmware has matured a lot since then, and a lot of those early problems have now gone away. So, yeah, I just wanted to drop that in, basically.
Yeah, before we carry on, Brian, I'm getting lots of questions through, so I want to try and address them as we get them. The first one, obviously, you saw EMP would take them out, though. It like Brian says, it's true, but they could get up there. You could get it back up and running relatively fast. Are you talking on a device or your phone? Said XP. It's on your phone, the app, but if I'm right, Hawkins, you can get devices and message directly on the devices, right?
Yeah, you can get standalone units. Yeah, there's a couple from
get the TDEC one.
That's the one.
Paul C says, will the mesh app still work in SHTF with no internet?
It will. However, caveat to that, you need to keep your firmware updated, and that's one of the things that and if any of the people off my mesh are watching this video by any chance, will know that I rabbit on about, and we rabbit on about, is people who don't update the firmware regularly cause issues for everybody else, because it's a product that's in development and it's in beta stages and everything like that. It really is a case of old firmware can cause issues. There's been some massive bugs in the past in that, where people had abandoned nodes. They put them up and either forgot about them. Bloody hell, the person could have died for all I know. Do you know what I mean? Or they just got fed up and just lost interest. But they caused issues for everybody else in the mesh. So that's just something to bear in mind. And then in Hurricane Helene, I heard one story about a guy who got all his nodes out of his box and thought, here we go. And the firmware on his Android phone, or sorry, the software on his Android phone had upgraded to such a late version, but he'd not flashed the firmware on his nodes. So he couldn't connect the two together because the nodes were too old, the actual devices for everybody. When we say node, we're talking about the hardware itself, the radio. So when he tried to connect his phone to the radio, he couldn't connect to it. And he had no internet to update the firmware on the node. So it's one of those things where if you are going to rely on it in a shit hit the fan, it's like everything. Use it and keep it updated, or do as I've got a box with about 20 nodes in of different types, Heltex and racks and a few others. And I periodically go through about every 2 months, plug a USB cable in and just update the firmware, and it takes me about 15 minutes to update 20 nodes. So it's not a big task, but it's just something to bear in mind. You don't want to be the irresponsible user who puts one up and can then potentially break it for everybody else.
If everyone's up to date and then SHTF happens, there's not going to be new firmware released anyway, right? So it would be fine to re-go. Yep. How easy is it for people to update them then if you're not tech savvy?
You just need a computer with a USB cable, and you literally go to the website, go to the web flasher, press one little link and it takes you to that. You select which node you've got, which now it's all user friendly with pictures of your devices you can choose from, and you just click it, you click update, and that's it, done. Like back in the day it was a bit more involved, but it's become, as the project has progressed, like I've only been into it for probably nearly 2 years, but as the project's progressed, it's really become easier. And in the really early days before I was in it, apparently it was even more difficult, you know what I mean? So it's becoming more user friendly. The software's maturing, it's becoming more stable. I can think of a couple where I am. There's I think 80 nodes in our area now. We slipped away to a private frequency to basically run away from the old abandoned nodes that were causing us issues. So we actually left the standard frequency, went to a private one. Well, not private, but a different one. Still within what's allowed legally, because there's a range at which they let you do it. And with a couple of well-positioned hilltop nodes, from my house, my signal pings out 9 kilometers away to a hilltop, and then from there I get out 70 kilometers, 80 kilometers in all directions. So I've got comms from, I don't know if anyone knows the area, but Chesterfield, all through kind of York area, Bradford, up through to Darlington and everything else.
I was picking you up crossing the Pennines, right up until the point I started on the downwards hill in towards like Burnley. I was still picking up signals. So
right in the early days, my plan was to bridge the Pennines because I've got some family and friends on the other side of the country on the west coast, and that was my original plan with Meshtastic, was to put a few on some mountaintops and hide them away with camo netting and stuff and leave them there. But again, it became a victim of its own success that Manchester area got so busy with nodes that if I was to connect the two and bridge them with a node at the top of the Pennines, you'd be looking at probably at peak times near 1,000 nodes, and it was just not serviceable at that point. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't built for that scale. So, but it is a brilliant system. It is a fantastic system, and the best thing is you're not. I know we're talking about, Brian said there's repeater nodes up by him, which have enabled him to get online. So somebody owns those nodes and they're doing it for the community. But you're not reliant on one, because of the way the mesh works. It's not one router as such. If there's multiple routers like we have around here, I think we've got 2 or 3 routers. So your signal will go out to all of them and it'll distribute it as it kind of wants. So you're not reliant on one particular person, one particular node, one particular piece of hardware, because the whole point of the mesh is it pings the messages around through every single node. So it's got that resilience built into it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Quick one there. Bands again says, how much does it cost? I mean, this is a sliding scale, right? You can put as much money into it as you want. But at a base setup level, what cost are we talking?
Well, Brian, what did you pay for your nice off the shelf?
Off the shelf, including the battery, aerial, chipset, all the different modules on it, 122 quid.
Mm-hmm.
But you can buy and build your own and different chipsets and options, 30 quid, 40 quid, cheaper. Depends what you want. But this was the most expensive one on the website, and with the recommended chipsets that Hawkins had said was a good one. It's like, right, that works for me. Boom, click. And Mike, I've sent you a WhatsApp message. If you want to ping that on the screen, that's what I got within a couple of hours.
What do you think? What do you think I'm dealing with here? I can't just whoosh it onto the.
All right, sorry. I thought you were quite tech savvy, not
Mikey
like me.
doesn't understand technology, does he?
I will. I'll get that up, but it'll take me a second. Here for Anarchy, who's going to be heading to the hills to change the batteries on a node during SHTF? Well, there's a solution for this too, isn't there, Hawkins?
Yeah, so the nodes that I've deployed, the permanent nodes, are solar powered. So they're a mixture of different ones. They've cost a lot more than what Brian said. I think my most expensive one is probably getting towards the £2,000 mark, to be honest. But that's in a massive, big waterproof enclosure with a 1200 watt hour LiPo battery, a Victron charge controller, a 2-meter antenna on top of a GRP fiberglass pole with ground anchors screwing it to the ground. It's the creme de la creme of what you could do for an install, and the whole purpose of that was that it was meant to be as bulletproof, and you just leave it and forget it and don't worry about it. If something does go wrong, apart from if you wanted to update the firmware, which you wouldn't need to at that point anyway, because everybody'd be on the same firmware, there'd be no active development, but that node will run forever. Essentially, there's nothing could ever drain that node, could never drain that battery. They're so power efficient. Well, the racks are, not so much the Heltex that have Stevos on there, but the rack nodes are so efficient with the chipset that they're just going to keep running and running and running.
Yeah, cool. Let me hide that current comment. And through the power of technology, that's Brian. It's in the middle. Sorry, Brian, you have to lean to the side. That's what Brian's picked up from his thereabouts, just going across the central belt of Scotland, just from a day. How long is that to pick them up?
I got about 7 within a couple of minutes of turning it on and it picking them up, and then within about 6-7 hours, basically I went to bed and woke up the next day, bang, populated.
Yeah.
But what that is if you connect to the mesh as such, there's no connecting to the mesh, but if you turn your node on and it's listening, it will. If somebody else was to send a message, you would receive that message, but you might not know who it's from yet, because it's a very low bandwidth protocol. Again, it's to not saturate the bandwidth in the link. The nodes don't send out too much information too often. So you're saying you got more overnight, Brian, and that's because people's settings will be to only send out certain amounts of telemetry every 4 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours or 10 hours. So you'll be picking up like one node now, and you might get his name and you might get his GPS position, and then you might not get somebody else for another 2 hours or anything like that. So it's everyone's there. You just might not see them all, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Killer71 said, are the messages private or can they be read by anyone? Anyone want to jump in?
As far as I understand it. I'll let Hawkins answer this because he's got a lot more knowledge than me. I'm a peon in this.
Yeah, essentially what Brian said. There's a standard long fast channel that is in use by everybody, and I won't go into too much detail with that because there's no need, but there's a standard channel basically that everybody uses called long fast, and that's think of that as the public channel. And then you can have up to 7 additional channels in the background. Think of them as chat rooms. Do you know what I mean? And they all you encode them with your own public key, and you share that key with other users. And I've got private ones. I've got all 8 used with different groups. Not many people use them, but we have a prepper group in the local area which sees a bit of traffic every now and again. So they are encrypted. And then in an update about probably 6 months ago-ish, they brought out encrypted messages from person to person as well on the long fast channel. So if you talk in the long fast channel, your comms are open to everybody. But if you private message somebody from the long fast channel, they are encrypted with PGP, which is public key encryption. So I'm not a coder. I can't write computer code for. I can say shit because Brian's already swore, hasn't he? So I can't code for shit. But
many times.
So I can't audit that. It's if somebody can audit it themselves, fantastic. But I can't to see how they've implemented the encryption and done it properly. But from all accounts, it's there. It works. It's good. You know, the NSA might read it, but I don't really have a problem with the NSA reading what we chat about in our local prepper chat when we're just chatting shit, essentially. So
they're watching us now.
Yeah, probably.
Let's quickly scan through these so it doesn't end up a complete mesh. Anyway.
You drinkers.
Right, we've already done that one. Do you have a link to the off-the-shelf version? I think Brian might be able to find one quickly and pop it in the chat for you, so just keep an eye out for that. Do you need an aerial as well as a device for mesh? Usually if you're getting the off-the-shelf ones, it comes with a little aerial sort of thing. But again, like Hawkins mentioned before, it's all about line of sight and stuff like that. So you've got a big aerial on the side of your house up top, or you've got your device in your loft, you're going to get more people. So is there a limit to the aerial they can have, like the power they can put out on this, Hawkins?
Yes, there is a limit to the power, what we call the EIRP. So this stuff will start going over people's heads if they're not into radio, but you've got your decibels of gain in your antenna. I wouldn't be going anything past really a 5 decibel gain antenna. With the devices themselves are very low power. I think it's 100 milliwatt that they pump out. It's next to nothing. But due to the fact that they are the way it was constructed, you can get messages out. But yeah, I wouldn't be going too much past a 5 decibel antenna, or the effective irradiated power level would probably be getting towards the point where you're breaking the rules, because this runs on ISM band. It's 868 megahertz in the UK, and it's a piece of free spectrum that's for industrial, scientific, medical ISM, and it's free. It's license free, like PMR, but you've got to behave yourself with low power and duty cycle. So it's shared with garage door openers. It's shared with, again, all sorts of industrial, scientific, medical stuff. Car chargers, like, you zap your car chargers on the sides of people's houses. They use it to communicate. So it's used by all sorts of stuff, and you just got to sit into that spectrum and not piss everybody off, essentially, and not break the rules, because we don't want to see it go away. So I'm sure somebody out there, I might have seen it, have built amplifiers and stuff for them, but I don't use any of them because it works fine on the power level that you've got if you can get that line of sight. So if you can get a node up on a hilltop somewhere, then you can get out for many, many, many miles.
Yeah. Cool. So, I mean, we're going to leave that there with the mesh stuff. What I'm going to do quickly now is, I don't know why I've got to do this every single time. Generate new link. Oh, it's not working. Oh, right. I will put a link to the Discord. It's just plain. It's Discord itself's been a bugger with it. I'll put a link to the Discord. Join the Discord, even in the public area, even if you're not a member of the channel and you can't access the full thing, and there is loads of stuff, so it's worth it. The Meshtastic bit is in the public area. So if you've got any further questions on Meshtastic, come down to the Discord. I'll put the link in after, and we will. You can get all your questions answered there. What I want to jump onto is the prompt from Full of Hope. She says dumb question, but it's not a dumb question. What is comms for in SHTF? It's all right to say talking to each other, but the caveat to that is why. So comms is obviously a massive part of your prepping, Hawkins. Why? No.
I don't even like talking to people normally. So I suppose I don't prep for EMPs particularly, or I don't prep for too much of extreme stuff. But the one thing I feel like I've seen coming on the horizon for quite a few years is what Brian talks about often, which is the grid going down. In my work and background, I work on stuff and I see how fragile certain areas are, and if people knew certain things that they shouldn't know, it'd be very easy for them to do stuff that they shouldn't do, if you know what I mean, without trying to get the video labeled. But it's a very fragile system that sometimes you feel it's just about scraping by. So if there was a regional or national grid down, how would you know? Like,
Yeah.
if having that information at your fingertips to be able to reach out to other people over an extended range, for me, I think is very valuable. You know, power went off at my house last week before, whenever it was only off for 3 or 4 hours. But if that had been something bigger, and if the cell towers had gone down at the same time, how would I know? And how do you know how far it's extended? If it was the whole of the UK, I would be able to tell if it was the whole of Yorkshire from the mesh. If it was the whole of the UK, I'd be able to tell from HF radio using JS8 call. If it was the whole of the European power grid, because God forbid something had happened, I'd be able to tell from chatting to fellow preppers in Finland and Germany and Switzerland and everything else. Do you know what I mean? There's that community that it might only be people saying, yeah, a status update, you know, sit rep, power's down here, it's been out since this time, nothing briefed by the government, da-di-da-di-da. But having that knowledge straight away, I feel would put you a couple of steps ahead of everybody else in the local area. You know, information is power at the end of the day, isn't it? And if you can share that information, like my work at the moment is about 70 miles away, but where I've extended my mesh to recently, I've now got comms from my work all the way back to my house on complete network. So my missus can connect to the node at the house, and I can literally send her private messages or whatever and talk directly to her.
Yeah. Brian, when it comes to communications and SHTF, a lot of people seem to, the comments I got were, they're going to listen. So that's similar to what Hawkins on about, where, you know, more information the better. But actually communicating out, bad idea, good idea, time period. What's your thoughts on that?
Again, it's scenario dependent, but let's look at it as the worst case. So the scenario Hawkins postulated, we've got power down. Now, I don't have HF, but if I've got no lights coming back on within 2 to 3 days, I know there's a major problem. And I've got to assume it's not coming back. So I want to be able to talk to my brother who's mile and a half away and be able to say, is it safe to go from point A to point B? Or he might be of the mind that he's coming down to where we are. And I want to be saying, well, actually, no, you can't. There's marauding groups of people at this location. Or here's a safe access and egress route. And then maybe a step further, you've got people in your local area. At night time, you're on fire watch because people are firing up the chimneys because the heating's down because there's no power. So you want people walking about, bit of security, watching that people's houses are on fire. They need to be able to talk to one another. You'll do more with less with good comms.
Yeah.
As far as people listening, you've always got to assume they're listening. You've got to assume that. So again, cheesy as it is, designators for everybody, right? Passwords, times of coming on, expected comms windows.
Yeah, so it's more about the plan if you're going to communicate out, right? It's more about having that plan in place and projecting that plan. A lot of people struggle with this, though, because you might be a prepper, but you might have somebody that's like George Coleman, who's in the chat, who's clearly not a prepper, which rendering prepper pointless. He's going on there. You might have someone like George in your family. He's not going to take that radio off you, Brian. So he's going to be out of comms. So what do you do in that situation, though? If George is a valued family member?
People will become preppers or whatever else they want to call themselves very quickly when they have to, right? Yeah. Need is get a good way of motivating people. Hungry people will do a lot of stupid shit as well. So it's a good motivating factor. Fear's a good motivating factor.
Yeah.
And if you've got
Yeah.
comms, that takes a lot of the fear out of things. It's good to talk.
It's good. I mean, that going through that situation alone, even whether it's localized, whether it's national, whether it's global, going through that completely alone, there's a mental aspect to that, right? Being able to just talk to somebody that's not right next to you is going to help. Hawkins, you've kind of got, I'm not going to give away your plans, but people don't know where you are anyway, but you've kind of got handout radios to create that local network, right?
Yeah, I've got 20 radios running on the PMRE frequencies. I've got about 20 Meshtastic nodes, and with Android, and I think even with Apple now, you can share the software for the phones offline. Definitely can for Android, share the APK. I've also got a couple of spare old handsets and stuff. I've got a guy in the local village who thinks along the same lines as me as well. But yeah, if anything was to ever go wrong, having communications available just appeals to me. I like to know what's going on. I don't want to sit there scratching my head wondering when I can talk to people and we can assess the situation together. One thing I'd absolutely love is for yourself, Mike and Brian and a few others to all get your amateur radio license and get on HF, and hopefully get you all through.
I'm doing it.
Get you all through JS8 call, because with JS8 call, there is a bit of a steep learning curve for that. It's not the most simplest of communication methods, but if you set up an MVIS antenna, which is basically where you project your HF signal directly at the sky above you and it comes straight back down again, that gets you near vertical instant skywave. So you get comms up and down. So basically the entirety of the UK on JS8 call. Now you could set up a UKPN, or call it a call group, but it's not a call group, but call it a call group. And then you could just put a message out to UKPN, and then you might only have 5 or 6 members, but you might have one in Scotland, one in York, you might have Miss Worm in France, you might have someone in Wales, and you're getting that regional communications then, and it's slow. It's not fast comms. It's slow. It takes a while for the message to send through, but you'd be leaps and bounds above everyone else. And we talk to each other on a daily basis in the Discord group, and we have a bit of banter, and we have a chat, and we talk prep, and we take the piss out of each other. It works. Why would you want to lose that in a grid down? You know what I mean?
I can imagine the shit jokes coming over that after the end of the world. 6 months down the line, some half dad joke comes down, and then you're waiting for the punchline for about 2 hours while this message. Can I just say a big thank you to CJ, £5 super chat. Thank you very much towards the charity challenge. That's absolutely awesome of you there, CJ. I've highlighted George's comments for later. I'm going to read them and laugh.
George has left.
He's left. Oh, he's left the room.
He is now.
All right. Has he been escorted?
Yeah, George was.
We could have converted him.
Gone. I converted him. Bye, George.
This is Brian's diplomacy. What about all the people in that survey? I don't want to talk to people at SHTF, 12% at that stage, and the people that are going to wing it. Is there a survival benefit, apart from the knowledge of knowing that it's happening all over the country and what's going on? Is there a survival benefit to having these over not having them? Because, I mean, I know some people think, oh, they'll track me, they'll find me, tinfoil hats, the government's coming to get me, they'll find me through my mesh node. What do you think the survival benefits are, Brian, to constant communications?
Oh, there's so many versus the disadvantages. First and foremost, good comms can prevent you making stupid, rash decisions because you're better informed, right? That's the biggest one. So you've got friends in other parts of your local area. You might decide to drop off supplies that they're coming to you, or you can't. There's a group of people at this point, that point, or even allaying their fears. That there's a whole host of things: security, gathering supplies, putting kit in different locations, even allowing loved ones to talk over an extended distance. because it might be safer. It's dark, the lights are out, you've no power, but they can still talk to their cousin or their uncle, their gran, just to say goodnight. That's got a huge psychological value.
Yeah, yeah. A question directly straight at you there, Hawkins. Put your name on the end. Would a wind-up FM radio not keep you informed? And I know my opinion on this. I mean, if you trusted the BBC all the way up until the end of the world, are you still trusting the BBC World Service after the end of the world? But what's your answer to that one?
So to a point, yes, I absolutely believe you should have one. I've got several different lovely Texan radios for listening to international shortwave stations at night, and sometimes I like to do that. Not very often these days, but I do. But again, you're relying on someone else's infrastructure. So if you're relying on the FM side of it, then you've got to have all the local transmitters up and all the local stations with generator backup and everything like that, and they need to be serviced. And do they service them? Like Brian was talking with the hospital, a lot of these places don't keep the batteries charged. They don't maintain them. Service contracts cost a lot of money. And if there was a national grid down event, that's not going to take priority over military, police, ambulances, hospitals. It's got to be divided up at some point over what's getting what. Then you could look at medium wave. So a lot of the antennas were sold to Absolute Radio or leased to Absolute Radio and stuff a while back. And I would say a while back, probably 10, 15 years ago now, God knows. But they've started cancelling all the contracts and stopped transmitting on a lot of them, and they're bringing them all down to nothing. It's because essentially it costs so much money to pump so many kilowatts out of these antenna masts, like the one on, is it Elmley Moor up by Huddersfield that you drive past each day, Mike? Well, not each day, Mike, but when you come over this way for work. So you'll see it there, but they're all getting shut down. So you'd look then to the long wave radio. So the station in Droitwich, 198 kilohertz, is it? I think it is, for BBC Radio 4. And again, I've got my qualms on, well, not my qualms, my questions of whether the government are going to keep that online for so much longer, because everything's moving to internet. They want everyone to be on internet radio because the government and these BBCs and everything don't have to pay the infrastructure upkeep for all these aging masts and antennas and all the old valves and everything that are still powering these things. They cost an absolute fortune to maintain. So now that everyone's got the infrastructure of the internet, it's not costing them anything to host a server in a data center and stream radio out to you, to me, to everybody else. So I don't think they're going to be here for that much longer, as much as that disappoints me, because I love the nostalgia of
the analog
listening to that shortwave stations and stuff. So, and again, if you're a prepper, why not bring control within your own sphere of influence, where you can talk to whoever, like you Mike, you work over this side of the country. You know, we've met, you've got a node on your car now. If something was to go wrong while you're at work, we can chat. You could come to my house. I could chat to you all the way back home. But not only that, I'm an amateur radio guy. So you're not an amateur radio guy, but I am, but we've both got the mesh. So that opens up all my information to you. Because whatever I find out off the amateur radio and talking internationally, I would redistribute that knowledge over to the mesh. So it helps more and more people, which they would then tell their neighbors and their friends. You know what I mean? So you're providing information on a community level to people to help.
And especially if that network is something like you've got with yours, where it's an established network of people you trust. It's not just some random bot throwing information in there. It's, you know, you trust your own people. Can I just say big thank you to 2 new members just popped in. Susan H became a member. Thank you for joining. And JP became a member. Thank you for joining. Really appreciate that.
Make sure they go to the Discord.
Yeah, definitely. I've put the Discord link in earlier in the chat. If somebody wants to find it and copy and paste, feel free. But that link will be valid if you want to join. Elusive Dartmoor, my family and friends have set up a time to communicate with safe words planned. Safe words is always a good idea. Safe words is all. That's something else. Planned. Have you guys done the same? Brian, do you have safe words?
I do. But it causes problems if you get the wrong version of flour. Oh, that's a different thing. But So I mean, we've
Elusive, we've as a network, there's a few of us that have already like put something like this in place, but yes, it's definitely a good idea. I think Hawkins mentioned it before about having ways to establish who you're talking to, right? And backup plans upon backup plans. And the main thing with this is getting that plan out to people, because it's all right you knowing a set of code words, you know, you say brown, they say blue, whatever it decides to be. But you know, if no one else has got that other sheet, you're just going to be sat there shouting brown down a radio, which would make it brown noise. There you go. Would a wind up FM radio not keep you forward? We did that one. Sorry about that. Just popping that up. I'm losing track here. If I'm keeping you guys longer than you need to, you can feel free. You can leave at any time.
I'm
not you,
okay
chat.
now.
Not
All
you,
right.
chat. You're stuck. Just looking for any more questions. Who's behind Mesh Network and how long has it been going? That's all you, that Hawkins.
It's an open source project. So a bunch of coders have got together and developed it. I don't know the original intent, whether it was for kind of disaster radio sort of stuff, but there's different ones. There's not just the one we use is Meshtastic. There's one called Disaster Radio that I looked into a couple of years ago. There's Reticulum. There's
That
one
looks
Andy,
good.
yeah, it does. There's one that Andy Kirby's designing now, but it's very limited hardware at the moment. And that is to make it less meshy, essentially, because the mesh, as good as it is, over big networks can cause issues, like I was saying before. So they want to try and design a network, from what I understand, of you've got designated router nodes and you can choose paths that the messages will take. So it takes the randomness out of it. So there's pros and cons to that. You know, you might lose a bit of resilience, but you'll drop the amount of traffic, which could increase the chances of it all working. But yeah, there's loads of different ones. There's one called Gotenna, which I bought many, many moons ago, and they make a civilian version and they make a military version, which is what the US military use for ATAC. So they run ATAC over Gotenna. And if you know what ATAC is, you know what ATAC is. If you don't, it's essentially a way of doing battle tracking. So the military use it for, I don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole here, but being able to keep hold of, being able to monitor all their assets, know where they are. It's used a lot by special ops for marking things and knowing where to attack, and you can put LZs and all sorts on it. So yeah, it's a very good piece of software, and it's available for civilian use. There's a civilian version called ATAC, which is Android Team Awareness Kit. And if you're a great Android user and not a terrible Apple user, then you can use that. And I set it up once, but didn't really have anyone to use it with, so I never bothered with it anymore. But it's, you know, if you've got your little prepper group in your area and you're using the mesh, it's a great way to be able to add another layer to that.
Yeah. There's another question on there. Does the upgrade Hawkins mentions mean basically a new form of internet?
Which upgrade was that? I don't know.
I'm not sure. I lost me a bit.
No.
That one. Last thing, practical advice for people. And I'll go around the board for it. Brian, you first. Starting off as a prepper, brand new. Obviously, we already know the core preps, food, water, you know, etc. What's your priority with communication, would you say? Knowing everything you know now, as a new prepper, what should they prioritize as their comms preps? Go and get a radio, go get a mesh, what would the priority be, if you think?
Honestly, I'd say jump on the Discord group and have a chat before you spend any money from people that have done it first.
Mm-hmm.
Don't waste your money. But if you were going to buy something, I don't think you can go wrong with a decent PMR set of handsets that you can, depending on your location, how, and a realistic expectation of what you want it to do. I mean, if you're going to be 5 miles apart in the city centre, then it's not going to work, right? But if it's in a local village and you're maybe going to be a quarter mile away, half a mile away, you've got a reasonable site picture, then yeah, just get a couple of PMR handsets and start from there.
Yeah. Hawkins, same sort of question. How, obviously you talked about tiered scales of situation, like you've got a use for the Starlink and stuff like that. What would be the priority for purchase order when it comes to comms, do you think, for somebody new?
Who do you want to talk to? Do you want to talk to random strangers, stroke random preppers, or do you want to talk to your wife?
I assume most
kids?
people will want to talk to family in their own personal network. We'll base it on that.
Yeah. Then I'd probably go down the Meshtastic route first. I do also highly recommend getting a PMR radio of sorts because voice is always nice. So I've got nodes for the wife. I've got Baofangs for the wife. You know, she's a licensed user. We can talk on multiple different things, but there's something nice about having those multiple layers of, you know, you can buy a Baofang for what, 30 quid, and you can buy a cheap Heltec node for 30 quid for the mesh. You know, you might need to upgrade the antenna and put it in a better box, but you can get started. So for 60 quid, you've got a voice comms and you've got data comms, we'll call it, via text messaging. Why not? For 60 quid, why not do both? And then if you decide you want to go down the rabbit hole, get your ham license and empty your bank account.
But Elusive Dartmoor, this could start an argument. What do you think? iPhone is better or Android like iPhone, because UK government is struggling to get protected data, which is good, isn't it? This is an interesting one. There's no difference when it comes to mesh and stuff, right, Hawkins?
No, they're both developed by Meshtastic for both platforms.
Yeah.
I think it's swings and roundabouts on who gets the latest updates. I think between one or the other, some get features and then some take another 2 months to get the features or whatever. But yeah, I'm an Android man. I think if you were going down the route of getting a smartphone, and for me, I'd do what I did. I bought Google Pixels and I ran Calyx OS on them. So I rooted them and ran like a more secure operating system that isn't Google or Graphene OS.
This is the rabbit holes. You can go and chew Hawkins' ears off on the Discord group. I reposted the link. Is mesh text only? Quick one there.
Yes.
There we go. I think we'll call that for the questions, people in the chat. Brian, I tried to do this in the middle last time, but totally forgot. Elevator pitch. Tell us all about Scottish Prepper 73. While there's 100 people in here who might not be subscribed for some strange reason to your channel.
I tend to concentrate on kit that I buy, do little reviews on them, and try and put information out there about things that I think, in my humble opinion, are worth taking note of. And it's generally the same thing I bang on about as power grid, low wind, articles in the newspaper prompting things that might come problems further ahead. That I tend to bang on about power a lot, an awful lot.
Yeah.
Maybe
Mrs.
he has
Hawkins,
a great wife.
Mrs. Hawkins is in the chat. Mrs. Hawkins in the house. He best behave. So if you've not already subscribed to Scottish Prepper 73, it's not just that. He's pretty on the ball with quick news updates when it comes to the grid and stuff like that. So if you want to stay informed quickly, subscribe and hit the bell on his channel. Hawkins, do you want to mention your website?
Who? Sorry?
Hawkins, do you want to mention your website?
The anonymous person? No, he doesn't have a website. He's all good.
That's fine. I didn't know if you wanted to with the mesh side of things, but do you want to plug anything random?
No, I just say that I agree with Brian with his power grid issues. I believe that at some point, sooner or later, when the weather conditions align, it's going to be a case of we're doing at least rotor disconnection in the best case, or if not, it's going to start shedding load itself, and it'll be potluck on what goes off and how bad it goes. You know, if it gets down to a complete grid down, it's a black start, and it'll be an interesting one. And that's the biggest threat that I've always seen. Well, I always said it would be that a grid down or a pandemic. So I got 1 out of 2, and I'm waiting for the second one to come in now. So
I think we're going to be doing a full grid down scenario based Fireside in a coming episode soon. So maybe you'll want to hold with that one as well, Hawkins. That could be interesting. I thought you were just going to plug that awesome flag that you had in the background. You know.
Oh yeah, there's a nice flag there.
For me, all my links are always in the description anyway. Thank you all for being here. All I want is like, subscribe, and all that wonderful stuff the algorithm likes. Support my charity work, which is more important than anything else. And make sure you go and subscribe to Brian. And, you know, I'd say subscribe to Hawkins, but he is a mystery.
An enigma.
Final thoughts, anyone? Hawkins, final thoughts and goodbyes?
Just for some people, it probably all sounds quite complicated and overwhelming, what we've talked about tonight, and it is literally the absolute tip of the iceberg when it comes to comms. I went down the rabbit hole 4 years ago, and I'm still going down it now, and I say I'm only a little foundation level license holder. You know, there's people way smarter than me doing the intermediates and full licenses, and these guys are proper clever, and a lot of them are on our mesh, which is great because you can pick brains when you need to, but the foundation level isn't that difficult to go down. You can do it with a bit of self-study. I think it's worth it for anybody who takes themselves seriously as a prepper. Why would you not want comms? So yeah, don't be scared, and come chat shit on the Discord, and we'll help you out. You know, Brian will help out with what he knows, I'll help out what I know, and I think there's 2 or 3 people now who are doing the Essex Ham course, and I'm sure they'll help out other people once they've got the license. So yeah, more the merrier.
Yeah. And before we get your final thoughts, Brian, just wait 46 seconds. That, of course, is Miss Worm, our awesome moderator, published author. Go over, check her channel out, let her give you some chills. Brian, final thoughts and goodbyes?
Well, I've spent about an hour and a bit talking about comms, and probably the best comms that's been done as far as the group goes is the Discord server, because we get a snapshot of an hour and a half on a Sunday to try and answer questions and try and get information from people and try and impart a bit of information. It's not a lot of time. So given that we're talking about comms, if you can, jump on a Discord, say hello, share what you've got to share, ask any questions you've got. So I think I'd have been remiss in talking about comms and no mentioning our primary comms at the moment as we talk on Discord pretty much every day. It's fairly active.
Yeah, not for the faint-hearted sometimes.
Unless you drink Diet Coke, in which case don't bother your arse. Just don't bother. We don't need that sort of person.
Yeah. All right. All right. Let's quickly change the background here. There we go. There's our lovely background, and here's our lovely song. Thanks for all being at the Fireside, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.
See you guys
later, folks.
Water stored in jugs and tins, bunkered down through thick and thin. Maps and routes all drawn and laid, preppers live unafraid. At the preppers' fireside we stay, ready for that fateful day. Stories shared and hearts alight, round the fire every night. In the glow of embers dance, we've prepared for every chance, living simple, living true, with the dream we all pursue.